Yo, 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 welcome to Crackle Comics Weekly, your favorite show about comic books. This is episode 66, Activate the Order, Calling the Demons, We're Going Down to Hell. We're talking about comic books. My name's Vincent.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Mike.
And I think, are we still doing the thing where we ask how our weeks went? Because mine was terrible.
I know your week was bad, just from talking to you this week. So if you don't want to get into it, that's completely fine.
Well, work has been a little annoying, but more so, well, actually not more so, but equally so. I basically I don't think I broke or did like anything super serious, but I basically just completely screwed up my ankle. Actually, right before last week's show. I don't know if I mentioned it on last week's show.
We're still on the ankle thing.
Yeah, no, I've still been recovering from it this whole week. I can basically walk around now. Basically, for like 2 whole days, I couldn't put any weight on it whatsoever. And then like 2.5 days, I was using crutches and trying to avoid as much weight as possible. And now at this point, I can like walk fully. Like I even walked a couple of blocks to go vote on Tuesday. But it's still like I'm not running or jumping any second soon. And it's just iffy. I was potentially going to have plans this weekend, but I canceled them because I don't think I could be walking around all day.
Not to bury you, but me and Dan have never seen Vince run or bend his knees ever. So that, in terms of there, like that's still the same.
That's true.
I was an offensive lineman, which involves bending knees particularly, as well as a little bit of running.
I was an offensive lineman too. I don't think that says much.
Same.
Well,
especially when the average play only lasts about 3 seconds.
For those who are watching YouTube, to be fair, Dan has a very different body structure than I do. So I don't.
What was that supposed to mean?
It's in response.
Elaborate on that.
It's in response to you saying you being an offensive lineman doesn't really matter.
I feel like I'm hurt.
No, neither of us are Penei Sewell. We'll put it that way. But also, we went to college with Vince for 4 years. Well, I did at least. Dan was out of there 3 years because he was a year ahead of us. But I have never seen Vince run, and the day I will be an event. But I have to ask. We have our trip to Harrisburg coming up. Are we going to have to carry you from store to store?
No, I mean that's a whole month. Actually, no, that's like 2 weeks from now.
3 weeks from Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I assume I'll be fine.
You assume?
I mean,
I could fall down the stairs.
I can walk right now. It's not, plus 3 weeks. And then there's not that much movement involved. We're going to be in the car like half the day and then standing, looking at comics, and I can just shift my weight.
I don't know. Those low shelves, you're not going to be able to reach those with that 6'4" frame.
Well, that's more of a back problem. That's always existing.
All right, so that concludes this week's What Hurts segment. Unless, Dan, do you have something that hurts?
No, I feel fine. How about you?
All right. I have a wisdom tooth thing, so I'm hoping to get those out soon.
Yeah, my wisdom teeth never grew in, so I don't have to get them taken out.
I have all mine, no problems whatsoever.
Weird mutant.
I am. I'm a mutant.
But you're not reading the X-Men books.
Nope.
All right. This is a comic book podcast. I think it still is. Superman Red and Blue #3.
Third issue of this series. I think we covered both. We definitely covered the first one. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories, unless I counted wrong. So I'm going to go through them all. So first we have Deadline written by Jesse J. Holland. Never heard of who that is. Not sure who they are. Art by Laura Braga. This is actually a pretty cool story. Clark has a super busy day and he's rushing to make a deadline on his column for the Daily Planet. Both Perry as well as Batman and Wonder Woman bother him about his timing. And basically, obviously Perry wants him to make the deadline and hand in his piece. And then Batman and Wonder Woman are waiting to have dinner with him. And they're like making a bet on, is he going to make dinner? What's he doing in the meantime? All that stuff. Bruce initially is kind of a dick. But then obviously Clark does some Superman stuff along the way before handing in his piece, gets it in on time, makes it to dinner on time. And along the way, there's a funny gag where like it's not even a villain. It's like he's not like a costume villain. He's just like a crook. But for some reason, this like standard crook has placed bombs all over Metropolis in lead boxes. And, the whole Superman can't see through lead. But Superman's like, yeah, I can't see through lead. But if there's something I can't see through, that actually makes it very obvious that that's where I need to go and that's where something is. Or basically like that. So it's a funny gag on his powers, but it's also a lesson on his powers. And this story's pretty fun. I think it used the color gimmick pretty well. Like at some point, like if it was a montage scene, like we'd see half the panel red, half the panel blue to show two different points of time. Just subtle things like that. Nothing like super experimental though. Now the second story, probably the one I was most excited for, is So it's called. I'm going to call it Kilgore, but it's this character and it's KILG %RE. I'm going to say Kilgore. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it. This is written and drawn by Michel Fife of Copra fame, but he's also has written and drawn like really small stuff elsewhere. He did some G.I. Joe, he did some Bloodstrike, and most notably for Marvel, though he only wrote it, he did All New Ultimates with like Miles Morales, really weird, obscure book that no one remembers. But finally, because this is technically his second DC credit, because he did a page in those Bendis Legion of Superheroes Jam issues, but I would argue that no modern creator / social media person has done more to sing the praises of underrated 1980s DC comics, like from writers like John Ostrander, Jerry Conway, and stuff like that, other than Fife. Like he's like, if you go to his website, obviously, so his independent book that he self-published and then Image published it, but then he took it back from Image, Copra, is basically like his take on the Ostrander Suicide Squad. And so if you go to his blog, he has like this like mega ultimate 6-volume custom bind of Suicide Squad with like every single possible extra you could think of, and like sketches and signatures and all kinds of cool stuff. And he's just like, he'll talk about like Hawk and Dove 80s, like the 80s title, and like Blue Devil and Firestorm and stuff like that. Lots of stuff that DC has not reprinted. And so this character that he's using here, Kilgore, is from Mike Barron's run on The Flash, immediately, once Wally becomes Flash. And Kilgore is tied up with Manhunters, and then he's also like impersonating and taking on the forms of some of Superman's more like cybernetic foes, like Brainiac and Cyborg Superman. So Superman goes to figure it out. He teams up with Booster Gold, Hawkgirl, and Cyborg. And they all have some really interesting banter. Like, obviously when superheroes are out doing stuff, they have their quips. And when it's a team up, they usually, interact with each other and have some kind of conversation while they're punching stuff. But these are very interesting. It's like Superman like talking to Hawkgirl about anger management. And he's like arguing with Booster Gold about sponsorship. Very interesting, like dialogue that you would not see in normal superhero stories. And then ultimately this ends with a nice connection moment where Kilgore basically explains like he got up to this because he was lonely. And so he's like, I'm a machine, I'm lonely, so I'll just like hack other machines and take over them, force them to like hang out with me essentially. And Superman's like, hey, you can just reach out like without being a dick about it. Like I would help you out. And it ends on a really, really cool splash page. Then we have A Man Most Saved, written by Brandon Thomas, art by Berat Pekmezki. Never heard of this artist, but pretty good. So there's this guy, he's been saved over and over again. His name's Charlie, spelled with Ley, and it's a guy, whatever. So he's been saved over and over again by Superman through his whole life. How does that timeline work since this guy is like middle-aged and bald? I don't really know. But he's being interviewed by Cat Grant on WGBS on TV. And we see a montage of all the times he's been saved, or the key moments. We see like a Silver Age style, like almost like a Bronze Age, Silver Age, Christopher Reeve, Chris Swan kind of thing. Superman saving him while he's a kid. So like again, the timeline. And then a point when it's he's in the black suit after the Death and Return. Then Electric Red, not Electric Blue, which is interesting to see here. And then I think it's in a T-shirt, so like it could be Grant Morrison, but that's flashback, so that should have actually been the first thing. So I think this is the Truth era under like Greg Pak and Gene Luen Yang in the end of the New 52. And so in the TV segment, it's like, is this guy unlucky or lucky? Because he's like, his life is constantly in danger, but Superman saves him every time. And over the years, because they're constantly crossing paths, he's like kind of friends with Superman. Like they'll catch lunch once or twice. And one day, Superman just falls from the sky while he's walking through the park, and Superman's got like some kryptonite. And this guy's a doctor, so he actually saves him. So he saves Superman this one time. And it turns out one of the TV assistants is a bad guy. He tries to shoot this character to bait Superman to show up, and then tries to shoot Superman with kryptonite, and they both save each other. So it's like Superman 10, this guy 2. So they're catching up with saving each other. And it's a really fantastic story. It's a really cool perspective on, we've seen this similar kind of story of like, the person who's saved by Superman and has been impacted so heavily, or even people who've been saved multiple times, or even like the weird stories where it's like people like bait themselves to like try and get saved by superheroes. But this was cool. Then we have Something to Hold On To, written by Nick Spencer, art by Christian Ward. And honestly, like I can totally see it now, but I didn't 100% pay attention to the credits at first. It didn't strike me as Christian Ward. It's not quite as usual, and I think a lot of that has to do with color. Usually, like his work is very attached to the coloring, but I can see it now. So first of all, but beyond what I just said about the art, Nick Spencer, pretty big surprise here. I don't know how this works because I have to imagine Marvel has an exclusive with him. I mean, he's writing their best-selling title. Kind of weird to see him here, but even more so because he hasn't been at DC since basically right before the New 52. He was supposed to take on the ongoing gig on Supergirl, and that basically got thrown off because of the New 52, and I think also slightly like the end of New Krypton going in a different direction, stuff like that. He had Jimmy Olsen backup stories, which I think ended in a one-shot, and I think that was he technically finished that, but I think he wanted to do more things with that and probably pull it into Supergirl. And then he was writing Thunder Agent while DC had the license for that, and it like wasn't doing well, so they relaunched it, and then that canceled. And then he left and I think he did Image stuff, and then he moved over to Marvel, and that's where he's been since. So it's interesting to see him here as well on multiple levels. And I felt like in the past, you've like been able to read into on his social media that he may have had like a grudge at DC, but it may be, it could be editors or executives that are gone at this point. So the actual story here, I went a bunch on creative, but I thought it was interesting on a couple levels. But the story here, actually, this might be my favorite here. There's actually really strong ones in here. So the story here is that Superman brings basically all the kids from an orphanage to have a field trip in the Fortress of Solitude. Because, he's an orphan. I mean, he was raised by parents. He was like, quote unquote, adopted effectively, but he's just an orphan. So he shows them around, shows them all kinds of cool alien doodads and, the crystals and all that stuff, gives them little flight rings to fly around a bit. And Toyman has snuck in the fortress as well, and he's trying to get through. And obviously, there's a little scuffle, and one of the kids in the process, because Toyman, controls toys and all that stuff, one of the kids loses their stuffed animal, which Superman has to destroy. So Superman goes into his, stash and gives this kid his like stuffed bear that he had from childhood. This was really good, very touching story and ending. Great art and great from Nick Spencer. And then our final story here. This is kind of the big book of the week, and it has a lot of pages and multiple stories. But the final story here is A Little Star, written and drawn by James Stokoe. There's a big giant asteroid careening toward Earth. Superman wants to break it up into smaller pieces, but actually it turns out it's a sentient being. And like in relative terms, compared to Superman or compared to humans, it's really ancient, but actually it's basically just a lost baby who like got like broken off from its herd. And Earth's satellites have confused it. Like it thinks that all the signals from Earth are like its species, like trying to like communicate and stuff. So that's how it winded up heading towards Earth. And Superman's solution is like let me grab a bunch of LexCorp satellites and just like weld it onto this creature's body so that then it goes in the other direction and its family finds it. And then we don't really see the conclusion. Like, there's not really a happy ending here. It's just like implied that it's going to work out. Like, Superman doesn't like, follow him along or like speed him along and like, take him to the destination. But he helps him out, and it's kind of cool. This actually felt like a Silver Age kind of story in terms of what happens. But this issue overall, I thought it was fantastic. I would say the first like 4 stories. Well, yeah, I'd say like the first 4 stories are basically like 5 stars. If anything, I actually thought the Stokoe one was the least interesting to me, but his art is fantastic. So you get what you come for here.
Yeah, I think we missed the second issue, outside of this being, I think, the longest recap we've ever had on the show. But I would have to say this is probably my favorite issue of the series. And yeah, it's every story was good. The Nick Spencer one was especially good. And this is now the second time we've kind of seen a Marvel writer come in and do something. We've seen Chip Zdarsky have a story in Batman Urban Legends, and now one in, well, he's writing that Justice League Last Ride, which we read last week. So I'm kind of enjoying the more crossover hop between companies that writers are kind of doing right now. I don't really know what the status is of who's exclusive, who's not now in either company. So I think it's just better overall. But as far as an art standpoint too, I think this is my favorite also from so far 3 issues in. I think this will go 6, just like Batman did, and then further in the summer we'll have Wonder Woman not red and gold, black and gold.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Mike, because like I wasn't sure like if Chip or Spencer was exclusive to Marvel or not. So that's kind of cool to see him on here. But no, I like this. This was definitely very, very cool to read, and I feel like in the first story, like Superman looks kind of like Archer in some of the shots. I don't know if it's just like the art style, but I feel like in the beginning, especially when he's like, in his civilian.
It's the very defined Superman chin. That's why.
Yeah, I don't know. There's this one panel that I'm like, oh my god, it looks like Archer. I never watched that show, but yeah, whatever. No, this is good.
All right. I'll talk about Radiant Black number 4. This Radiant Black number 4 is Kyle Higgins, Marcelo Costa, Rod Fernandez. Nathan, our main character, is getting some strange dream visions from the black hole that's now in his chest, which they found way back in issue 1. I think we missed a few issues, but I did catch up. It's still been good. I know it's been me and Vince's, or I should say Vince and I's more favorite new superhero book in a little bit. Dan should definitely catch up on it. But maybe you want to mute me and not listen here, because kind of a big twist for this week. Spoilers, because we're going to spoil your books if you haven't already figured that out. But he basically wants to further his powers and figure it out. So he calls his friend Marshall to help him, and he thinks he can shoot energy blasts. So he has him set up some action figures for him to target and shoot the blasts at. So he learns that move, and they're headed to the movies when Nate's attacked by Radiant Red, who we saw like back in issue 2, and they fight. And it takes them inside of the town, inside this building. The structure's starting to weaken and crumble. So Nate uses abilities to try and hold it together to get everyone out before it collapses on himself. So Malcolm runs into the debris to try to save Nate, but turns out, he's dead. And the black hole now asks Malcolm to become the next host to it. So it looks like our protagonist is dead, and the friend is now going to take over, which 4 issues in, it's a pretty huge thing to have from Kyle Higgins. I applaud the gutsy move here, because I was liking the character we had. I don't know if he's fully dead yet, but it's a huge twist for 4 issues into a book, especially when you didn't even think that was going to happen. But like I said, it definitely adds more intrigue and excitement for what's to come. And on already one of our new favorite superhero books that's coming out right now, along with Marcelo Costa, it still continues to be very strong. But I'll hand it quickly over to Dan for Wonder Girl.
Yes, so Wonder Girl number 1, written and art by Joelle Jones, colors by Jordi Belair. So this is the character from the Future State series, getting her own not mini series, I guess ongoing. So our story opens with a retelling of Wonder Girl's adolescence as we see her mother killed by these like skull Roman guys. My co-host can probably tell me who those people are, but I'm going to call them that. So we also see her aunt, I believe, take her to safety. So during this whole flashback, we get narration of someone landing on an airplane, or not like someone on an airplane landing in Brazil, where we find out that Wonder Girl has landed in Brazil, where she was born, and is coming there, I guess, just as a tour group. Meanwhile, oh my god, I can never say this name correctly. I'm not gonna try. But anyways, over there, and then in Mount Olympus and Bana Migdal, we see Queen Nubia, Hera, and Queen Faruka, respectively, experiencing some type of disturbance. In Rio de Janeiro, we see Wonder Girl again on a bus tour when she decides to get out and save a man from an exploding car. And we do get a little creepy interaction between her and the bus driver. He's kind of like, she says how there's a lot of distractions, and he's like, yeah, a lot of distractions, as he's like looking at her. So kind of weird placement there, I guess. I don't know. That kind of stood out to me. I don't know why. But anyways, so yeah, obviously she doesn't really care about concealing her identity, I guess. No one really questions her on the fact that she survived an explosion from a car. But later she's at like this like waterfall, and like there's like this vlogger that's like next to her, and she's like, get away from me. And then as she's looking off of the waterfall, she gets like roped with like a chain or something, and gets yanked into the ocean, where she meets this water creature. So and that's where our story ends. So definitely very interesting. I would say this character is probably the high point of Future State, for me at least, probably for my co-host as well. Not a lot of good stuff came out of that whole event, whatever that was called. But yeah, this is a really good start to this, kind of establishing her background a little bit more for us, and really excited to see where this goes. So what do you guys think of this?
Well, it's always a positive when you have Joelle Jones drawing any book on your rundown every week. But no, this is very good. Excited to see where it goes. I think that was Ares at the beginning. It looked like Ares, but who knows?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Who it could have been. Because Ares has had like so many redesigns at this point that I don't even know who he looks like anymore sometimes either. But that's who it looked like. Very slow. Like, we don't have a costume yet. We're not doing superhero stuff. Well, we kind of did. She saved the people from the fire, but yeah, no costume or anything yet. No, she doesn't have her little sidekick that we saw, but we only had her for 2 issues with Joelle Jones and Future State. Obviously, there was the Superman and Wonder Woman book and then Justice League, but focusing on strictly this creative team, we only got 2 issues from them. So this is their time to really flesh everything out. And that's definitely going to happen as DC is, given the green light for this character to really, basically that's their new hit character, and we'll see how far they run with it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the whole concept of Future State was, most of the stuff was in the future. So really we saw like the character 100% fully formed and like all their lore built up. And now we're back to square one. And so it feels like changes, but I guess it's not necessarily changes. I mean, we had a kind of similar thing with Swamp Thing, where obviously the Future State title was totally different in premise than the actual title that we have now. But it's obviously at least the same character. But yeah, I guess, like we didn't know any of this in the Future State book, or they may have changed it. I'm not really sure, different continuity stuff, however you want to put an asterisk on it. So there's room where they could have moved. But now we learn that actually she was raised in the U.S. I think what's being implied here is that, yeah, she is an Amazonian, but after some like trauma went down, she ended up in the U.S. and was raised as an American, but she's a Brazilian American because somehow she's a Brazilian Amazonian. I don't know. And then I'm not really sure when Nubia became Queen of Themyscira. I don't know if that's right here or if that's picking up on one of the last Wonder Woman runs.
That was in Infinite Frontier number 0, I believe.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I thought I read that, but I don't remember.
You did, but you don't remember it, but you did read it.
The main thing is, yeah, I really, really love this book. It's a really, really pretty book. I like Jones also, like, she does have like way more like stylistic, like variety, diversity, whatever word you want to use, than you think. Like when we see the scenes flashing over to Olympia or Themyscira, she does like a manuscript, like old school, like gilded leaf, like book kind of thing to do like the title card and slightly different styles for each. And then like, I think I said it in the Future State books, but like, it's not even like I'm not intending to be weird about this, but like Yara Flor, just a very attractive character. And I like how this book is like kind of totally leaning into that. Like there's the whole thing where like the bus driver is like completely like, is like, wow, this chick is like really attractive. And like, they're joking about that. And he's like, there's so many distractions on the road. And I just really like this character. Lots of energy and charisma. And the book kind of, the book, like the writing and the art and everything, the pacing carries like a similar vibe as the character herself.
Yeah. And I would say the best thing I've seen out of Joelle Jones here is that every superhero book I've seen her do, I mean, Lady Killer isn't a superhero book, but her art is the same but different. Like her art from Batman is going to be different from this, and then also Supergirl being Super, that OGN that came out, also looks different. I like that it's still the same but different in its own expressive way to fit each book that she's worked on, which I think is really cool. But we have another life story series.
Yes, Fantastic Four Life Story #1. This is Mark Russell and Sean Isaacs, colors by Nolan Woodard. So President JFK enlists Reed Richards in like 1961, I believe, to build a rocket because they got to catch up with the Russians. The Russians have gone to space. They've taken a human out into space, but we're not to the moon yet or anything like that. So we have to catch up with them. And Reed has a plan, and he's working on it. He's got his ship. He's got his fuel. It's very experimental, like antimatter fuel. But at the last minute, the government, like they just like aren't fully sold on it, quote unquote, the government. So they pull the plug. Really, there's like one guy who's basically Reed's rival in the government who has a big grudge against him and is like also his oversight. So Reed gets his stuff dashed, and Sue pushes him to go through with the launch anyway. And it's dumb that I'm not remembering accurately, but I believe this is how it happened in the original, in Fantastic Four #1. Sue's the one who kind of like nudges him and is like, hey, you don't want to let those Russians win. But this version, Reed and Ben have no history together. Ben is someone Johnny knows somehow, and it's not remotely explained. Considering Johnny's like 17 and Ben's like this veteran who like got fired and is like in a bar. I don't know. It's not explained, but whatever. They get up into space. The cosmic rays happen. They crash back down. Now they have their powers. Quick like hospital freakout scenes. Further dynamics set up. Obviously Ben is way more upset about his powers, quote unquote powers. They go on a parade though, because technically they're Americans who went to space. So JFK is like, even though you guys all get screwed up, you're Americans who went to space. And I guess, the average citizen is not going to be worried that one of them turned into a giant rock. They start doing super heroics. We see the Mole Man scene. And then Reed and Sue get married. There are Avengers present. So like there are other superheroes in this world. We see Cap, Scarlet Witch, and Black Panther, and maybe Tony in his civilian identity. It's not 100% clear. And then JFK dies. They meet the Beatles. Sue marches with civil rights activists, which like, I'm obviously not saying like that the Fantastic Four was racist in the 60s. They're not, like they weren't, especially on the page. And like, I get that retroactively we want to think that Sue Reed was marching out there hand in hand with, MLK. But I feel like that's a little bit of rose tinted glasses, like retcon. Like we didn't really need that panel. Like it's a nice idea, but I think it's kind of like giving too much credit or something. I don't know how to describe it, but I think you could definitely analyze that panel, and especially like, never mind, I won't get into I was going to say also like for what it is worth, the people writing and editing the story, probably all white people, but whatever. And then, JFK died, so Nixon is here, and in the Cosmic Storm stuff, Reed had a quick vision of Galactus. And so he has these nightmares, and Nixon's like, hey, I'm screwing up Vietnam. I don't have time for your nightmare nonsense. And then the creepy rival scientist makes a deal with Ben where he will revert Ben back to human form. He'll take on the Thing form and take his place on this little mission where Reed is trying to figure out more about Galactus. So they see Galactus. The evil scientist guy is like, hey, I was wrong. You were right the entire time, and I'm just going to die right now. And then at the end, Ben Grimm reconnects with them. Reed and Sue have Franklin, and they watch Armstrong walk on the moon on TV, assuming that Armstrong actually walked on the moon. So this catches us up to 1969, which is kind of in line with real world publishing because Franklin is born in 68, but obviously that's well after the Galactus trilogy. I don't really know how to react to the series. Like, it was good, I guess. Like, the art's fine, the writing's good. I really don't like the retcon / change to Reed and Ben. Like, this is Life Story. This is not like a retold in canon origin, as far as I know. Obviously, that's the whole point of Life Story. So, like, I'm not concerned about it, but it was just totally unnecessary. I don't like it, you know, in a recontextualization or retelling of their story. It just, why? And, like, kind of changes a lot. This was much more normal than Spider-Man Life Story, which is kind of what I wanted from that. And I guess I like it here. But then, like, why does this exist? And I guess that's how all of these #1 issues of a Life Story concept will be. That's where it starts, pretty normal and as you'd expect. So I guess we'll see just how hard it detours in the following issues and how much I get pissed off at it. But I like this first issue, but I don't think Mike did, which is interesting because Mike was much more positive on Spidey than I was.
Well, the biggest surprise is me saying I didn't like something by Mark Russell. I've liked everything I've read by Mark Russell so far, and this is the first time I've had. No, I didn't like it. I don't like some of the changes. It just felt disjointed. It wasn't paced well. Some of the issues with Spider-Man Life Story was each issue was about a snapshot in 1 year. This is going 10 years. Was it Nixon he was talking to? I thought he was talking to LBJ, but either or, like, it just meanders around. Some of the changes, like, no one read like they read like the characters. Like, at least with Life Story at the beginning, Peter still felt like Peter to me. This doesn't feel like the Fantastic Four at all, really, in my head. I got no sense of, like, and also the world is weird too. So, like, they went to space, right? But at the wedding, Captain America and Scarlet Witch are there. But in the Marvel universe, we've been to space already by that point. So it's like, you mean to tell me the Avengers haven't been to space, and because we're still waiting for Armstrong to get on the moon in 69? Like, none of it makes really sense to me, where it's just like, the harder you think about it, the harder it just kind of breaks down to the point where I just don't want to read it. And also, like, this is, I guess, taking place on its own Earth, not in connection to the Spider-Man Life Story. So I guess just take it with the way it is. All these Life Story books are going to be self-contained to their own Earth. They won't be crossing over at all. But, I like both of the creators involved here. It just, I didn't like this, and that's a disappointing thing because I did get a little bit of hype for it. But I can say I was, with our next book I'll talk about, I don't know if there's a better book right now. And I'll go into that unless you have anything else to say about Life Story.
Just that we will, for this episode at least, spare our listeners from hearing Dan discuss the moon landing.
Yes, that's correct. Which it did, by the way. I'm not gonna put up a scroll bar, but yes, the moon landing did happen. But Nightwing number 80. This is Tom Taylor, Bruno Redondo, Adriano Lucas on colors. So when we came into 2021, I called Batman Black and White number 2 back in January, maybe the best issue I read all year. I said that when I made that claim, I said it's very early in the year. I don't like using the word perfect a lot. We'll see what happens. But when it comes to Nightwing number 80, this is a perfect comic book, and it's better than Batman Black and White number 2. And I'll say that very early. Tom Taylor, Bruno Redondo, Adriano Lucas are making this the best book here at DC. If you're not reading Nightwing, you got to catch up on this. We are only 3 issues in, and this has just been excellent for the first 3 issues. Dick Grayson gets a knock at the door from the Bloodhaven police wanting to question him for what happened to the man that he was helping. His name was Martin Holt. He gave him the hotel and he was helping him out because he was homeless. But he got murdered by this new villain, Heartless, and he quickly calls Barbara for him to provide an alibi, which is like great sequence because they're balancing the humor where they're like, well, what's your relationship? And Dick's just like, what is our relationship? Because it's not only we're fitting Dick Grayson back into the Bat family, and we're all kind of, and with the Bat family characters, we're all kind of navigating what's everyone's spot right now, especially for him. He spent for like 2 years not knowing he was Dick Grayson. But the main point goes to, all right, let's go find Martin's son. So Dick recruits Tim Drake, going fully by Robin here. And not only that, he calls him the best Robin, which that's always, a plus for me as a huge Tim Drake fan, to track down Holt's son, Elliot. And Tim goes undercover to try to reach out to him. They see that Elliot's kind of held up in this home shelter for children in Bloodhaven, and they get, they track him to there. We get a fight scene later on when Electrocutioner and Brutal show up. So we get to see a really cool and expressive fight scene with Nightwing and Robin. Then there's a fire, and Robin goes to save the civilians, and then Dick is face-to-face with the new villain, Heartless. So next issue 81, we'll get Nightwing versus Heartless, as it says right at the end of the book. But you look at the art here, you look at the colors, you look at the writing, everything out of here is above a 10 out of 10. It's absolutely more than perfect. I'm going to come out in here and say, thank you, Tom Taylor. This book feels more connected to the Bat family without even needing a crossover that takes 12 parts to have everyone join up. People just kind of weave here in and out how it should be. And also, this is like the first time that Dick Grayson and Tim Drake have teamed up in what has to be easily over a decade, just the two of them. And you can totally hear the Shirley Walker Nightwing thing from BTS when reading this comic. Absolutely perfect. I love it.
Yeah, these colors are absolutely gorgeous. And then the art, there's some insane layouts and quote unquote camera work. We see like overhead shots of a whole room and then other different angles that you don't hardly ever see. We see there's another sequence or two of that kind of like David Aja Hawkeye-esque like graphic thing, which is cool to see. And then, yeah, the Tim Drake line, like it's literally, quote, Tim Drake thought of as many as the best Robin. Like it's totally winking at the audience, Tom Taylor talking to readers. And then I'll throw out that the two henchmen here, not the like new character at the very end, but the two other guys, Electrocutioner and Brutal, they're returning villains, but they're like kind of deep cuts, which is cool to see in any superhero comic. One's from Pre-Crisis, and then Brutal, the guy who has like the stupid like mask on, he's from Dixon McDaniel's Nightwing run. So really fantastic.
And then we've also had Blockbuster show up too, so it's really kind of a renaissance of like, let's get all of Nightwing's villains back as well. So I'm loving it. But Dan.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great issue of Hawkeye. No, I was kidding. Yeah, no, I mean, it. Bottom line is that it's just fun. Like, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I just, that splash page of the book of Nightwing and Robin, I thought was just amazing. Yeah, this issue really read fast for me too. Never really felt slow to me at all, which is always important to me too. Don't want to get dragged down, but no, I mean, this is good. Yeah,
but when it was over, I was like, I want the next one.
Yeah,
I want to just keep reading.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of reminds me of like old like 80s or comics where it's like next this Heartless versus Nightwing. Like it just seems very classic, and I don't know, I like it. It's very, I don't know. I'll keep reading it for sure.
It's Tom Taylor's the man at DC. He has this, and he'll have his own Superman book in a few months. So, well, the train keeps riding. But the book that comes out every week, Dan.
Yes, and probably shouldn't. So, anyways, yeah. So, episode 66, Amazing Spider-Man number 66. Written by Nick Spencer, art by Mark Bagley. So he's still doing the art. Inks by John Dell. So Mordo is screwing around with Kindred and is eventually captured by Norman Osborn as Kingpin gets reacquainted with his newly reincarcerated son as well, Richard Fisk, otherwise known as the Rose, I believe. So we kind of get some symmetry there. Kind of cool to see that. Elsewhere, Peter is still upset about Boomerang betraying him as the new Avengers plan to go after Richard Fisk. So interesting to see kind of where that plot thread leads us. We get Randy Robertson hanging out with his girlfriend, and Joe Robertson running into, I'm not sure who that is is it Tombstone? I don't know. I don't think that's who it is. But anyway, he runs into some random guy in the bar. Mary Jane teams up with Overdrive to find Carly Cooper, who has gone missing. Norman tries to get his son back while he's talking to Kindred, which doesn't work, and actually causes Norman to get slapped in the face and left in pretty bad condition. Peter finds out that Betty Brant is pregnant, so interesting to see that. And our issue ends with Carly Cooper in a cell with Norman Osborn. So what the heck's going on? I don't know. This series is, obviously still keeping my attention. Nick Spencer's on a pretty good run here. But there's definitely a lot of stuff going on here. So a lot to unpack. But I'm excited to see kind of where all these plot threads lead us. So that's me, Spider-Man 66. Kept it under a minute, I think.
It's another reloading issue. It serves as the wrap up to King's Ransom and the further, plot threads of what we've had dangling. Like the stuff with Carly Cooper goes back, I feel like 20, 30 issues now. So he keeps coming back with it, and he doesn't forget about it. He leaves something there, and he'll get around to it when he wants to get around to it, and that's absolutely fine. Mark Bagley looked fine here. Some Spider-Man looked like too small to me. Like he had a big head, but like small body. That would be my takeaway from the Bagley art. I like the fact that like Robbie and Tombstone are just kind of cool because their kids are dating, but it's like the minute that's done, like we still hate each other. That it's just kind of a fun, thing they have. The Jonah bit where he's now no longer hating Spider-Man, he's hell bent on making him a hero. It's so Jonah 100% in just a different way and spin to it. But and then MJ's back now, I guess, with Overdrive. So yeah, a bunch of stuff going on here, but like I was down with it. Like I like where it's going. We got the Baron Mortar stuff. We'll slowly but surely maybe undoing one more day, and then I guess we had the Harry true heel turn because he turned on Norman and threw him in the cell. I don't know how Carly Cooper got there, or I guess we do because something with that back when the first Kindred story was going on. Maybe that's how she ended up there, but we'll find out. And next week or so when the book comes out again, because it comes out like 3 times a month. But we'll get into X-Men Corner.
Over in the Way of X, on the second issue, this is Cy Spurrier and Bob Q. So Legion enters Nightcrawler's head, which is a crazy pirate scene, which is kind of fun. He finds something there for him. It's like a poisoned coin. And then Nightcrawler goes to recruit Nemesis and Pixie, and then everyone barfs. I don't know what's happening in that sequence. And there's like a skinny guy that's walking around. There's reference made to the suicide of Blindfold, which was Matt Rosenberg's first major casualty in his Garbage Fire run. And, well, if you don't know, Blindfold and Legion had a really strong connection in a previous series, which was previously written by Cy Spurrier. That was the X-Men Legacy second volume in the Marvel Now kind of era. So it's interesting that, Legion is featuring here and Spurrier is, bringing the character back. So anyone who's a fan of that series totally picked this up. And then everyone ends up in Legion's mind, which is like infected and stuff by Orcus, which is like one of the, ongoing background like foes to mutants in the Hickman run, introduced, even in House of X. Nightcrawler then mercy kills Legion to give him a clean slate to fix his brain. And that's a big deal because Catholicism and don't murder people. And Charles, for a minute, second guesses restoring his son's mind. And he's like, hey, the kid's kind of crazy, so like maybe we shouldn't resurrect him, even though they already have resurrected him. He's just questioning the very last step in the process. So Legion's just like, don't worry about it, Dad. I'll just do it myself. And he's now embracing the name Legion. And this ends with a tease for some version of Onslaught, which of course people think of Onslaught as this giant, stupid, crappy 90s crossover, which then resulted in half the characters seemingly dead and going into Heroes Reborn and all that mess. And that's exactly what it was. But Onslaught itself, you know, if you recall, is like this weird, like latent, edgy, mad part of Professor Xavier's mind, but that's like also mixed with all the rage of Magneto. So this is like Legion and Nightcrawler teaming up against, I guess, like all the people in charge of Krakoa who think they're, you know, have everything figured out, think they have the answers, and kind of have taken on a superiority complex in a certain way. And that's kind of like my critique with this era as a whole. So like so far, I'm kind of digging this book because this is the book that's actually like digging into some of the things that I actually want to see that have been frustrating me. So like I said, it's a half Legion book following up on X-Men Legacy. It has some of that continuity that I wish was there a little bit more in this status quo and in some of the other titles. Bob Q's art, really good. It's got a little mix of cartooniness, so like at certain points I'm like a little iffy on it, but his storytelling is fantastic. And Spurrier, anything Spurrier writes is like gonna come off slightly like weird, if that makes sense. He's like kind of in the vein of like a Peter Milligan kind of guy, who I think did the next Legion series after X-Men Legacy. But that's my take. It's a good book. I think I'm gonna stick with this.
I didn't get around to Way of X #2. I will catch up because I did like the first issue, but I have Wolverine #12, Ben Percy, Scott Eaton, with J.P. Mayer, with Oren Jr. on inks to 2-part inking team, colors by Matt Wilson. So we're back to that running Dracula and vampire storyline in Paris that sees Wolverine trying to save his friend Louise from being fully turned into a vampire. She's already been bit, so she's like already kind of half turned. We have Omega Red playing both sides of because he's kind of like the informant for X-Force, because you know X-Force is the CIA for mutants now. So they send him into the vampires because they want their own Wolverine. So that's exactly what they do. Forge and Beast make like a toxic clone of Logan that they bring them and to the vampire nation, and it turns and corrupts them. But in order to really kind of like exterminate a lot of them, and we get to that gray line of like, is what they're doing morally correct? Probably not, but also they're vampires, so it's that gray line that Percy's been having in both this and X-Force. And then Wolverine is going to one of the 4 horsemen to help him with this vampire problem, and it's death. So that's interesting. I did like the stuff with Logan and Louise where he gets her kind of like some upgrades to help her from Forge. I thought that stuff was good, but overall, like I kind of been weaving in and out of this book. I like X-Force, but Wolverine is just kind of, it's okay. I like the Scott Eaton art here though, but overall, I think this book is on like my chopping block, honestly, for whether I stick with it or not. I think it honestly depends on the week it comes out. Like if it's going to come out on a busy week, you can probably bet on me not reading Wolverine, and I'll probably catch up later. But that's kind of it's my lowest tier X book at this point that I'm still reading. I wish I would have kept up with Way of X to weigh in on it this week, but by #3 I'll probably be caught up. But I'll go to Dan for another team book in Justice League number 61.
Yeah, so Justice League number 61, written by Brian Michael Bendis, art by David Marquez, colors by Tamara Bonvillain. Our story opens with Brutus, who is hunting down the Justice League, I believe. We then see all the heroes assembling, starting with Black Canary, who fends off some of Brutus's minions. Naomi, who is saved by Batman, and we get some kind of cool interactions between the two of them. Superman, who's in the sky and his laser vision's basically going haywire, and then Brutus shows up and like slams him into the ground. Green Arrow fends off some of Brutus's minions as well. Aquaman just decides to lay down, seemingly passed out or dead, I guess. And Hawkgirl shows up and meets up with Black Canary, where essentially all the other heroes team up, and Black Adam shows up as well, kind of as like, an assist, I guess, to kind of stop Brutus as well. And the Justice League assemble to take him on. So that's kind of where our issue ends. I didn't read the backup story to this, Just didn't have the time, or didn't really want to actually. But yeah, this was all right. I don't know. I don't think I've liked anything Brian Michael Bendis has written at DC, and this is no exception to that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is all right. There's not really anything going on, just a bunch of team ups and stuff. I can definitely hear Brian Michael Bendis' like dialogue coming through, and for some of these characters, it doesn't really work. So
Brian Michael Bendis needs to stop writing every character like it's Brian Michael Bendis talking.
yeah,
That's been the issue. That is the issue. I was critical on the first issue. I didn't like the David Marquez art. I was totally wrong. This is great. Like the art is fantastic in this book. Like that David Marquez art with the Tamara Bonvillain colors is it's gorgeous. The Superman is exactly what you'd want Superman to look like. I liked the I liked the kind of consequences of this different Earth where Superman's laser beams are going all crazy, so he's got to talk to Batman and be like, "Oh, I guess it was like this time we had to work it out." But also, like Batman's talking to Naomi and just says "Ducktales" for no reason. Like with every good interaction you have of the hero strategizing, you get like something completely left field that doesn't make any sense, and that's the issue here. And also with it, it's Bendis decompressed storytelling 101. This is the third issue of his Justice League run. Nothing has happened yet. It's another. I'm sorry, like whether the design work that goes into it, Brutus might as well just be Rogolzar number 2. Like, there's nothing interesting to Brutus, and there was nothing interesting to Rogolzar in the Superman books. I don't care. The Justice League has plenty of villains for you to use. Use them. Don't make nameless big monster for Superman to punch. We already have like 5. We don't need any more. Would be my point. But then my other point with this, Dan, is that like it's another story where where our hero team is going to an alternate Earth. He did that twice in Young Justice, and he's doing it here. It's like, do you have one story now? Do you just keep recycling it? Like, I don't know.
I feel like it's one of those things where like DC's not going to tell him no because of his clout. So it's like he's just writing all these stories that just, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the way it is. But here's the thing. Do you have the same thing? Like, part of me wants to keep reading it to see where it goes, but I know nothing of worth is going to happen for 2 more issues because I've been conditioned on this from years of his writing with the way he wrote Avengers, with the way he wrote X-Men, with the way he wrote any other team book for 20-something years.
Even Civil War too, right?
I didn't read that. I read 1 issue of that and went no. So, and then I liked his Superman at the beginning, but I didn't like this. And then he's writing Checkmate in a few weeks, I think with Malieve, and then Green Arrow's on that book too. And so it's worth flipping through for the David Marquez art. I didn't read the backup either with Ram V's Justice League Dark. I know you didn't because you have no idea who the characters are in Justice League Dark are, and I don't blame you. But when you get done with the Justice League portion, you just kind of want it to be over, which is a detriment to Justice League Dark. But I also think the book's too bloated. Like the 2 stories I've read for that Justice League Dark backup, it feels, because it is the backup, it feels like Ram V has to like he only gets so many pages, so he has to stuff in as much as possible. So there's like boxes all over that. But Ram V's has our next book on our rundown, which is Catwoman, and we'll get into that. Which Catwoman number 31. Ram V, Fernando Blanco, and Jordi Belair on colors. Misdirection is the name of this story, and it's the heist that Selina and the Strays enact to save and free Poison Ivy from capture. Very cool layout sequence where it begins with Selina being confronted by the man she's robbing, and we see her explain how the whole thing went down because they've already succeeded. So she just kind of like, we saw the infiltration at at this art gala and seeing all the points of interest laid out. They see how the Strays got Poison Ivy out and snuck her out. So she just uses herself as the distraction and be like, yeah, we're already done with this. Tell me what you know about this Mr. Saint guy. And the guy, instead of, giving information, just turns the gun on himself. And he's like, whatever I say about this mysterious Mr. Saint, it'll be worse that he'll put me through. So it's better to just off myself now, which is kind of a huge moment. As the Mr. Saint's being penned as this big bad overseeing this part of Gotham, I think Old Town is what it's called. They take Ivy back to safety, where it looks like the Stray's new base will be an abandoned rail yard station, which provides some really fun art in colors for the team to work with here. Ivy, and I'll say this for Vince, Ivy is written in the same kind of fractured way that Ramsey was handling her in the Swamp Thing, which, same writer. So I'm waiting to see if there'll be more connections between them in the future. But last part, some stuff with the villains that set up with the future state status quo, which is irksome. I don't like that at all. But I guess DC is hell-bent on making future state more ingrained, but I don't like that. But like I said, I wish we wouldn't have it. But hitting in the art, Fernando Blanco's action scenes here are very crisp, and the talking scenes laid out with a lot of humanity and vulnerable expressions. Reminds me a lot of Matt Wagner's style on Batman and Mad Monk and Monster Men. I might have said that before, but it's really there, and I love it. And then Jordi Belair at this point, we talked about it on the show 3 times already, is just great on color. Like at this, the standard is the standard for Jordi Belair's colors at this point. So that's all I have to say on Catwoman. Daniel, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, no, I mean this was solid. Yeah, as I say, I don't like the fact that they're referencing future state. It's like, just let that die, please. We don't like it's so unnecessary. Like, we don't have to mention it.
We'll keep Wonder Girl, keep everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we don't have to mention it, but yet again, here's DC trying to shove it down our throats. But no, I love this.
Like they paid for all the work, so they're like, we got to get what we got out of it. But it's also like, we didn't like any of it, and it was just a placeholder anyway. Like,
yeah.
keep next Batman, because that's hot, and then also keep Wonder Girl, and then just do out with everything else for it. But you had Captain America 29.
All right, so Captain America 29, written by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Leonard Kirk on art, colors by Matt Nilla. So Cynthia is attacked by some of Alexa's minions in the woods as a test, I guess, before continuing on. Elsewhere, Cap shows up with Baron Strucker as he plans with Nick Fury and Ross to capture Alexa and speak with Alexander, who is the Red Skull, for the crimes that they've committed against the U.S. and the Daughters of Liberty. Meanwhile, Sharon Carter speaks to the Kingpin and drops off a thumb drive of information on Alexa. At the same time, the Daughters of Liberty and the Winter Soldier are tracking down Cynthia and Alexa and actually capture them, only to have somebody actually snipe and kill Alexa, which we don't know who that is yet. So there is a third party in play here. We don't know who that is. Could be Alexander. I highly doubt that. Maybe it is. I don't know. But yeah, this is definitely getting into more of that spy thriller stuff. Obviously, Cap is getting closer to confronting the Red Skull, so that's really cool to see here. Obviously, this Red Skull kind of dealing with more of like mass hysteria type of tactics instead of fighting him directly. So interesting to see where this goes, this run. Definitely want to collect some time in trade paperback, because I feel like reading it, was this bi-weekly, once a month? I don't know. I just feel like it's better to read like all together. But no, I really like this, and yeah, that's all I got.
Now, The Flash, written by Jeremy Adams, art by 3 artists. Actually, I'm only going to tell you 2 right now. So, art by Jack Herbert and Brandon Peterson. So we start here with Jay Garrick and the original Ray, Happy Terrell, doing a mission during World War II for FDR. So this is our second book this week, where we have a actual president interacting with heroes, giving them a mission. And they are after the Sphere of Destiny. And along the way, they get captured by Nazi agent Parzival, who can neutralize powers. So some people may not catch this. There's no footnote or anything, but this is a direct reference. The character of Parzival, and even the Flash and the Ray doing this. This is from the Golden Age miniseries by James Robinson and Paul Smith. which is like kind of sort of not supposed to be canon, but whatever. And this whole Spear of Destiny thing, and basically this mission, this is the explanation why the heroes with powers did not go past enemy lines during World War II, because Hitler had the Spear of Destiny and could like block them or like whatever, stuff like that. So only like non-powered characters like Americommando / Mr. America / whatever codename he's using at the time would go actually behind enemy lines in Germany. So Hitler has the Spear of Destiny. Suddenly he has superpowers, and along the way, so Wally gets trapped in Jay's body because he's been like flying through the Speed Force, and somehow that's had him flying through time and getting trapped in various people's bodies through time. The first issue, you know, he was running from dinosaurs, and now he's hanging out with the Ray, and basically he like figures things out because Barry, Ollie, and Mr. Terrific, they're in the present and they can kind of communicate with him through his mind. So they're advising him, and he punches Hitler in the face, but actually technically it was Jay like retaking his body for like 1 second. So Jay punched Hitler. And then Wally zips out of the body at the end. And at the very end, the final page, he's on to the next body, and he's now inside Reverse Flash's body, but like a Legion of Doom meeting in like Super Friends style / Super Friends era. Like, I don't know how this works, but I guess, you know, we're fully in the Morrison like multiverse, omniverse, I think they're calling it, era. And this final page, drawn by the surprise third artist, Kevin Maguire, who I think his name's not on the cover in the credits, which is actually kind of cool. Goddamn, this was great. The art is on point. There's some deep cut World War II and JSA lore, which is totally up my alley. And then that wild ending page with the drastically different art style and coloring, and it was crazy. I also found it's really interesting. There's a ton of discussion before Wally takes over his body, between Jay and the Ray. There's a lot of discussion back and forth about faith and God. And that's, to me, pretty surprising in a superhero comic in general, and especially in superhero comic in 2021. But I was welcoming it. I thought it was pretty interesting because it's so rare. And I'm really feeling this book, which initially, you know, this based on the writer, no disrespect, but, you know, not an extensive comics history based on the writer, sort of the artist, more so like just what Flash has been through for a decade. I had pretty low expectations, but at least based on what I've read so far, this is one of my top books. And I think, you know, a lot of the DC books we covered this week, I mean, I had the fortune of not reading Justice League, but across like Nightwing, Flash, and Wonder Girl, like these are probably like they might be like 3 of the top 10, maybe even like top 8 books I'm reading right now on an ongoing basis, without counting like very limited series type of things, which is an interesting development, because for a while there, basically before Future State, like the DC books we were reading was like the list of that all across all 3 of us was like really, really shrinking. So it's interesting that it's turning around. I mean, obviously Future State was in the middle, so maybe it was helpful, even if Future State itself kind of was just placeholder and not that good.
I think this was Jeremy Adams' best issue yet of The Flash. I know I had my mountain of words on that first issue, how I wanted to love it, but I wasn't quite there yet. After 3 issues, I think he's really starting to find his ground, and every issue is built on itself, and it's been at its core fun, and that's what I wanted. Very skeptical, like I said at the beginning, but yeah, last 2 issues have been very good. And it's also hard to pass up a World War II Flash story with Jay Garrick, especially when it involves punching Hitler in the face. Getting Kevin Maguire drawing the next issue with the Super Friends vibe, and that's going to be, you know, some chaos humor that definitely is going to ensue there. Yeah, this makes for a really, really strong book right now, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Somehow the 3-man art booth team, like, it's working. It shouldn't, like, but it does. So they constantly find a way to make it work and exciting, and that's just a great testament to the people involved here. We're still kind of playing to the greatest hits with the speedsters. running through them. I hope it wraps up within the next issue or two, and then we get some more traditional Wally stuff. At least hoping to see Linda Park again, because so far we've only seen her in one panel so far. But overall, this has been very good.
Yeah, I mean, not really much else to add. I mean, just love seeing a comic where Hitler's like possessed by like a magical staff, or it just, I don't know, the dark shadows on the characters too, like the shading in this issue, I thought was really cool. It kind of like sets the stage for the time period. I feel like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I appreciate that in particular about the art. So, but yeah, no, great issue. Really enjoyed this.
All right, we'll get to our second to last book, but really it's a double dose of Daredevil, as it's Daredevil number 30 before we do our retro, which is also another Daredevil book. But this is Chip Zdarsky, Marco Cicchetto, and Mike Hawthorne. So we're both with two-man art team, and then part of the colors done by Marcio Menez. I think Marco Cicchetto is coloring himself. At least that's what the credits had. But Matt is visited in the hospital by Kirsten McDovey, Foggy Nelson, and Detective Cole North because he got stabbed in the last issue. And they basically coming to him with a new deal where if he goes into a private prison, investigates information of corruption, they'd commute his sentence. But because Matt is being a stubborn fool, he declines, and he still whisks back to Rikers, but not before Cole is in, the car riding with them, to like trying to basically appeal to one more time, like truly calling out. It's like 3 people that like you a lot are in this room with you, trying to make sure you get out of here because you're not doing any help being in here. You're just being selfish at this point. And really just calling him out on it. So hopefully, Matt sees the light. But second part of this is Elektra dealing with basically the new crime lord of Hell's Kitchen in Butch, the son of the Kingpin, and friend of Mike Murdoch, who's Matt's brother. Quick, off tangent here, like, we just got the Rose back in Amazing Spider-Man with Wilson Fisk, but also Fisk is trying to turn a new leaf in this book and be good and straight, on the straight and narrow. But in Amazing Spider-Man, he's putting like a huge cabal of villains together. I feel like the Marvel editing staffs need to get on the same page with that a little bit, because we're getting 2 very different Wilson Fisks in Amazing Spider-Man and Daredevil. It conflicts a lot, but they come face to face in this nightclub where Elektra has to fight off an attacker of the Hand. And the young girl she's been training, Alice, kills the attacker to save her, shooting her with a gun. So really great line beforehand, though, while Elektra's entering, because like she's just like claiming she's Daredevil as Elektra now, and she's like, yeah, but the name is simply instills fear more than command. So it was just a really, really good line. But last segment is Kingpin being informed that Bullseye escaped from Ravencroft. So, oh no. So we're going to get a classic Daredevil versus Bullseye showdown, but with a different tease, as it'll be Elektra and Bullseye this time, most likely. We still have the double art team here handling different segments. Hawthorne gets the Matt segments. Cicchetto gets Elektra. I think Hawthorne looks pretty good here. This might be his best I've seen him, because the first couple have looked a little bit muddy in parts, but it's looking better. Cicchetto, though, still Cicchetto. It looks as crisp as ever. It looks great. So that's Daredevil number 30. Dan, how do you feel? Still your favorite Marvel book?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, this whole run is just great, and I don't know. It seems like he, continues to, step that line of almost being related, almost being too much like the runs before it, but it just is a totally different thing that, I don't know.
It keeps finding a different way. It puts a different spin on it, where it's Zdarsky. He's playing the hits, but he's doing it in a much different way, and really kind of putting all the spin on Matt Murdock. And that's kind of been the whole run, is like, you're too selfish for your own good, which has been a thing done before, but it's been like really hammered in this time.
Yeah, because I mean, it just, there's a lot of really emotional moments here, but I don't know. I like the whole Elektra Daredevil thing. I hope, we'll see what that looks like next issue, but yeah. Well, this is still really good. So
I'm semi worried about. Yeah, I'm semi worried about hand shenanigans being involved, but at this point, 30 issues in, you have in the team that's given to you. But all right, let's dial it back to 1966 for Daredevil number 17. This is Stan Lee and then it is Jazzy John Romita and Fearless Frank A on the inks. I've never heard of Frankie Ray before, but very wacky issue here for a retro book. It's Daredevil versus Spider-Man versus the Masked Marauder. So getting straight into the opening, we see Daredevil dangling fucking Nelson out the window of the law offices because he thinks that Daredevil is Foggy because he looks around the room because of his spider sense sensing off danger. And it's like, well, it can't be Matt because Matt's blind, and it can't be Karen Page because Daredevil's a guy. So that it's just so odd that we open an issue with Spider-Man dangling fucking Nelson out a window. And doesn't suspect it's Matt yet, but this is still very early in either character's history. This in turn, though, it makes Karen Page think Foggy is Daredevil because of this, and Matt knows he's got to set the record straight with Spider-Man and needs his attention as they're both kind of tracking the Masked Marauder. So he goes to J. Jonah Jameson to get Spidey's attention, and Jonah puts like an ad out on the television to call out both to this auto plant building that'll lure both of them there. And if it works, Spidey shows up, attacks Daredevil, completely forgetting that he had teamed up with him against the Ringmaster. And then soon enough, the Marauder's blimp enters the scene, and we get the hero team up we've been waiting for as they both save the Automotives building and try to take down the Masked Marauder. But Marauder gets away. Daredevil gives the interview in the post-fight that says that Spider-Man actually helped him and he's no villain, to try to clear his name. And then on the streets below, Karen sees Foggy, who's walking out of that building, and he's like, I was at the dentist. But Karen's like, did you see Spider-Man and Daredevil were there? So that further thinks that Foggy's Daredevil, and he doesn't give her an answer. He's like, he just kind of gives her the shrug, like, I'm not Daredevil. And he's kind of playing into that because he likes Karen. So that's all happening while the Masked Marauder is changed into a police officer's uniform, and he sees this and overhears it. So he sets his sights on Foggy because he thinks Foggy is Daredevil because he overhears the entire conversation, while the real Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is trying to scour the city trying to find the Masked Marauder. A lot going on here. At one point, we even have the editor's note claim that this is like the most thought bubbles on a page on a panel at one point. There's like 6 thought bubbles in one panel. The crowding in this issue is a lot. It takes away from the Romita art, but there's also some panels by Romita Sr. where Spider-Man looks really wonky and disproportionate when fighting Daredevil. Those are not as crisp as I wanted them to be. But not Stan Lee's strongest hour in the writing department, because this feels overwritten and crowded to hell. And then also, Masked Marauder, another in a long line of bad Daredevil villains, years before we'll get Bullseye. But next issue tease is that the Gladiator, who's been a character, that Frank Miller has kind of transformed and had him stick around in a Daredevil spotlight ever since. But I'll hand it to you guys. How do we feel about Daredevil number 17?
This was, it's a product of its time.
It's not great.
I was doing some quick research, and Vince might talk about this as well, but I believe this is 2 months before John Romita Sr. takes over drawing Spider-Man. So interesting to see kind of the art style that he was going with Spidey in this issue. As you can, I could definitely tell. There are hints of what was later to come, but yeah, it's definitely not as crisp as what you come to expect from his Spider-Man run with Stan Lee. So but other than that, this is just definitely very wordy.
Yeah, it's very wordy, but if you want to focus in on the Romita art, it's there. There's parts where yep, that's Romita art, but there's also parts where he's like, all right, he's not the John Romita Sr. on a Spider-Man yet, but it's in a few years it's gonna be there.
Yeah.
All right, so I didn't look into the timing as Dan did, but I just now did. But first, I will say that this is a major guest appearance from Spidey, and he's not shown or even in a caption on the cover, which seems really weird, even for the era where usually
they on the cover.
Well, yeah, I guess it is obvious, but still, you'd think they would hype up, hey, Spider-Man is totally here. But part of that, let me look up the Daredevil 16 cover super fast as well, because part of that is that you can like kind of tell, but like it's not super obvious, as it would be in the modern era. This is a follow-up to the previous issue, and the previous issue is actually an iconic cover of Daredevil and Spidey, and they're like over the New York skyline. But after a quick Google, and this might be partially like fandom theory, but the story is that Stan and Ditko, their relationship was obviously already deteriorating, and the theory is that these issues were basically Romita's audition in order to take over Amazing Spider-Man. So the Stan wrote Spider-Man into the plot to see how Romita would handle the character and also how fans would react. So he passed the test and he got Spider-Man.
See, everyone thinks Romita was on Daredevil for longer than he was. He wasn't on the book very long, but he had a very big impact for the short time he was there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, I think he was there like at least a year, like slightly longer than you'd think, but also not as long as you think. I don't know how to describe it, but I always think he was barely there, but I think he's there a little bit longer than I think. But like, yeah, the first several, like 2 years or something of Daredevil, they're really rocky because you have, Bill Everett co-creates the character, and I think he draws a single issue. And then you have like Joe Orlando, an ex-EC guy, I think does like an issue or two. And then you have that Wally Wood
for like a hot second.
And then I guess, Romita's at least the next major person, but then you finally get Gene Colan at some point.
I would say at this point, looking at the history, as good as John Romita Sr. is, and damn, I love his Daredevil, I would have to give the nod to Gene Colan over Romita Sr. for the impact at this point. Looking at the publication history. But all right, guys, it's that time. Picks of the week.
I'm giving mine to Nightwing, but Flash, pretty close. Wonder Girl, pretty close, like I said.
Just for the sake of not picking the same thing, I'm going to go Wonder Girl.
Okay. Mine's Nightwing. Like, you basically heard it in my rundown, but like, all right, I'll give you Wonder Girl, but like, at least you didn't go and be like, it's this book just for like, that was a really good book too. But it's very rare when we all go with the hat trick. And I wouldn't mind, like, when it happens, it's rare. So, like, if you want to keep it on Nightwing or give it the tie, they're more than fine with that. But, yeah, it was a strong week for DC. Really strong week for DC. Which maybe the first time that's happened since we started doing the show, man. Like, I can't remember I had this many DC books that I liked all in 1 week. There was only one DC book I didn't like. And I'm still not dropping that yet. So with that, it's another big week of books. We'll be back next week. Take care. Stay safe. So long. Adios.